Yeah. If you don't mind, I just actually heard of like this framework for communicating. Daniel Priestley, I was listening to a podcast with him, and he has this framework called name, same, game, fame, and aim. He's got this like 5 word thing where it allows you to kind of prompt and fill in the blanks. So, name is who you are and who or what Exogen Lila or Lila is. So if
Oh,
you,
do you want me to go ahead?
yeah, I want you to go ahead, dude. Yeah, take it away.
Right. I'm Joe Dolcetti. I am a little background. I'm originally from Canada. Now make my home over here in Asia. I have been in the sports world and training athletes for probably close to 4 decades. I started my first performance role when I was 19, back in the 80s when we were still convincing people that they should go to a gym. And now,
Yeah.
40 years later, everybody's telling them why you might not need the gym so much. So I've done this field uh, through many cycles around the world, from the Olympics to the pros, and I've been blessed to, especially with LILA now, the company I developed over the last 20 years, just be exposed to just an entire new level of performance, literally in every sport, in every region of the world. So it's just given me, it's like this beautiful cap on the sunset of my strength and conditioning career, but the start of my business career.
Couple of things, man, because I already want to ask so many things. You had said you'd started when trying to convince people to get into the gym, like working out, lifting was just
Yep.
not a thing. And now
Zero.
convincing people not to go to the gym, like that shift. Where do
Well,
you feel like that shift is coming from as somebody that's been in the space, man?
I talk about this a lot because I'm a big believer in sort of the overall pedagogy of our field, right? You know, when you go back and you go back to the original sports science or human kinetics or what was called physical education, you got to remember when I did my undergrad degree, it wasn't there were I had never even heard the term human kinetics. I had never heard the term kinesiology. I had never heard the term sports science. Not because no one was talking about it, it's because they literally didn't exist.
It wasn't a
It
thing.
was
Yeah.
physical education. I took
Yeah.
PE. And in those early PE years, you were studying the history of physical education, why people needed to be healthy and active, and calisthenics and military role. And I remember one of my sports sociology courses telling me, if you don't know your past, you don't know your future. And I always really took that in. And I don't think a lot of people in our fields, unless you've been around for a few decades, and I don't mean one or two, you got to be late 50s, 60s, 70s to have gone through that, where we were in the 70s and 80s, people weren't weight training.
Yeah.
And that became a thing. So if you mentioned the 24 to 28-year-old crowd, they don't even know what I'm talking about right now. They're like, dude, I saw weight training on TikTok or Instagram every day that I've been on my phone.
Yeah.
Well, I can remember being 19 years old, going to try and find out about weight training, and there wasn't even one book on it.
Yeah.
There was a guy called Bill Pearl, and he
Mhm.
wrote a book called Getting Stronger, and that was a Bible for almost 20 years. Anybody who wanted to be a strength coach found this big thick book and read through, foundation pages on how to do a lunge and a squat and that. I went to my university gym every day because this was a different story. I got injured, so I started learning about the body. And I was in that gym every day by myself.
Mhm.
One day when I'm 19, to give you context, the national wrestling coach walks into the gym. The National Training Center was at my little university then. This was 1984. Walks into the gym, says, "Hey, Joe, I just read something." He had an article. I don't know where he got it. I just read something that like the Russians and all these guys, the Iranians, they're doing these things called like Olympic lifting. Like
Yeah.
the wrestlers are using this to get strong. This is one of the reasons so powerful. We got the Pan Am Games coming. Like, have you ever seen these before? Do you think you could teach them to my guys? The wrestling team who was in the wrestling gym 8 meters away from the weight room had never even walked in the weight room,
No
because
kidding.
weight training for wrestlers, and they had Pan Am champions in there. And the reason because they use their own body weight as weight.
Hmm.
If you watch wrestling back then, not much very different from today. You're going to Muay Thai, combat sports are very traditional. They would carry each other for weight training.
Yeah.
and they knew that movement was more important than muscle. So I remember getting these wrestlers in the gym, teaching them a power clean, a hang clean, and a squat. And I can tell you this, none of them wanted to be in there.
Yeah.
And I go back and I think, and I was like, yeah, sure. Next thing you know, he says, can you do this regularly? This was my first job. I was literally training Canada's national wrestling team as a 19-year-old who was learning about
No
strength
way.
training from Russian texts that I found in our library that were in Russian, and Muscle Fitness magazine, which was, of course, Joe Weider knew the
Yeah.
future was coming and people were going to pump up, and that was then.
Yeah.
And so where we are now is like our company is everybody's realizing, maybe all this heavy weightlifting isn't doing what we thought it was going to do. Because
Okay.
what happened in the field is this: we all knew people needed to get stronger. This weight training was getting you stronger. And so people said, all right, well, I need to be strong. Weight training makes you strong. I'm in. And we jumped in. And then we found out, well, wait a minute. Strength and specific strength and movement, those are different things.
Yeah.
So big, heavy, strong bodies don't always make better athletes. And I can tell you this, if I look back on it right now, I wouldn't, in 40 years, I would have taken 50% of the people that I trained off, even going into a gym. Would have saved us a lot of injuries, would have got us a lot better performance and probably more longevity. Like some of the best athletes in the world, the only really good thing we got out of heavy weightlifting was injuries. I shouldn't say really good thing.
Mm.
And so, and I'm being a bit direct on that. I still do heavyweight training because it maintains my muscle mass. And at
Yeah.
58 years old, I want to maintain my muscle mass.
Yeah.
But if that's not your game in your sport, then you have to be thinking very closely and a little bit more about what wins. And I can tell you this: strength is a predictor of winning in less than 5% of sports on the planet.
Hmm.
And if you think about that as a metric, as a variable, then you ask, okay, so what is performance?
Yeah.
If you ask it, like you ask somebody before a game, and I talk about this a lot, and this is the message for young strength coaches: don't follow what strength coaches like to do. Concern yourself with what it takes to win a game. Because what you like to do is teach everybody all your information. What you like to do is be in the gym. Most strength
Yeah.
coaches are gym guys.
Yeah.
You start becoming a gym bro, then you want to try and teach it, and you love squats, and you talk about things like winking and butt wink and blah blah blah, and you go down the detail. And I can tell you, there isn't a head coach for a sports team in the world who gives a shit about any of that.
Yeah.
He's like, look, are they fast enough? Are they quick enough? They got too many injuries. Are we ready to win? And so I'm not saying weight training is not important. I'm saying understand what it takes to win, because your job is to help that conversation. And heavy strength and more loading, we found out it doesn't seem to transfer as much as we once thought. A big, strong athlete that lifts has a place in some sports, but probably less than 10-15% of athletes even need to think about that.
Mm.
Now, that's it, but they all need strength. And I think what's exciting today is, well, we are developing new ways, smarter ways, movement-friendly ways, way more efficient ways to build strength that helps you win versus just building strength and thinking about just jumping on and lifting because everybody's done that for the last 40 years. So that's kind of that context on, I don't want them to be turned off saying, oh, Coach Joe said we don't need to lift and that guy's an idiot. I'm not saying that. I'm saying understand the limitations of some of those things and know what you need to win and know your tools. And in that, figure out what you need.
So it's very interesting, Joe. There is it's not a move by me per se, but the way that we interpret the word strength. I think when we hear the word strength, based on what we've learned and based on what we have come to understand about it, is, for lack of a better way of putting it, is thinking high left side of the force velocity curve, right? High force. Maximum strength in like the classic sense, right? Yeah. And slow strength, right? Whereas even having this conversation today with somebody else, strength is relative and specific to the movement that you're doing, right? Like it doesn't have to be high left side, but the output of that can still be maximal relative to the movement that you're doing. So it can be low right side, high velocity. The person that does that better than everybody else is stronger than them, right? The person that can express that. And to your point, I think what we're is a general misconception of what the strength need is of the athlete, to your point. So it's not that they're not getting stronger, it's are they getting specifically strong for the
Yeah,
needs that the sport is required of them?
yeah, yeah,
Is that
100%.
yeah,
And
where do you land on that, I guess? When you hear me describe it that way, is there anything that you would amend to that sort of interpretation?
no, and I think it's a great point. There's we have there's a great slide that we include in our level 1 course. And that was a slide from the late 80s or 90s with Vern Gambetta. And it was basically the strength velocity curve expressed in terms of where success in sport focus. And it says most training focuses, it's reversed on the camera.
Right.
Most training focuses, yeah,
Here.
high left side of the curve, high force, low speed, when most sport occurs at high speed, low force.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm saying is we have to rethink that. Now the problem is what most people don't realize with the tools we have as a strength coach. Most of the tools strength coaches were given, certainly from my day, were not given to us by people who were interested in building athletes. They were given to us for people in an industry that was driving something very different than athletic performance.
Yeah.
Olympic lifts, bodybuilding lifts, gym training. That was about the body beautiful movement. And that was about the commercialization and compartmentalization of free weight movement as people in the commercials gym started developing to try and make it easier. So when everybody got this word, hey, we need strength. Hey, those fitness gyms have all this strength stuff. Let's get in that gym and let's figure out how to use that. So strength coaches jumped on board. They started using it, but any good strength coach was like, all right, this doesn't do exactly what I needed to. I'm going to have to start creating something. And every strength coach I know, and I was talking with Nick Winkelman, and I always make up Nick because he's such a great guy. When he first saw our kit, he said, Joe, I can tell you this, every good performance coach, strength coach, physio trainer in the world has tried to figure out how to glue weight on the body. Yeah. And you guys finally figured it out. Yeah. But now it's going to take us 20 years to figure out how to use that, because the only load we ever used was an external load.
Yep.
You know, and so they don't understand that the tools they're using were not created. And I'll give you a little story to help you understand this. They were not created by people trying to improve athletic performance. That, however, is starting to change.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing inventors, creators, sports scientists taking a look at sport and saying, we need to develop better tools for movement. The fitness industry gave us all their crap. Thank you. Some of it's good. Let's push back on some of that baggage. Hey, no discredit. I know Arthur Jones very well. Gary Jones from Hammer. I know his father. I know Dennis Kaiser over there at Kaiser. There's been some great people that have put some really innovative stuff out there. But it wasn't for sport. In our level 1 course, we've probably run a couple thousand people through this. There's a module in that course where we explore the history of weight training. And at the end of that module, we have a practical session. And we tell them this. You got $1 million budget, unlimited budget, anything goes, all the technology in the world at your feet. Design a piece of equipment that will give specific strength to an athlete, regardless of sport, environment, or conditions. Mm. You develop it. And nobody out of those 1,000 people, physio, some of the best coaches, S&Cs in the world, nobody designed anything that looks like a free weight or a piece of resistance or a traditional band. They all come because the limitations to those things are too great to really provide transference.
Yeah.
And so what does that tell you? It tells you we are babes in the woods in developing movement for really high level movement. And then I go back to what Nick Winkelman said. He didn't just say we're the first guys to figure out weight on the body. Arguably, we probably are in a meaningful way. But he said it's going to take us 20 years to learn how to use it. And that's exactly what we've done. because most strength coaches, they look at our kit and they're like, oh, so I don't even know where to start putting the load. And I said, imagine that. You know how to load a bar better than you know how to load a body for movement.
Yeah.
And so I just feel like we're just at such the beginning. And the one thing I always tell people is you don't have to come in and buy kit, but you do have to realize it's changing. Movement's changing. So don't get too hung up on the tools that you're using as new tools come out. And you mentioned something at the beginning. How do people wade through, well, what tech is good? What's a gadget? There's so much stuff out there. Yeah, I think that's going to be the real challenge, is wading through, the tons of information that's coming at you. And really, here's the secret. If you understand your 4 laws of training, and I don't mean I've read them and I understand them. I mean, you've practiced them. You've probably read some, at least some Russian translation on it. Periodization, 101, individualization, specificity, progressive overload, overtraining. Everybody says, oh, yeah, I got that. And then I look at them and I watch their training. I'm like, but you don't understand that this is the primary driver for everything.
Yeah.
And so much so, in fact, when I evaluate a program, whatever it is, it's from the mandate of those 4 things. And it's always one of those 4 laws has been overlooked. And your equipment needs to also consider that. If the equipment is limited in its ability to individualize for the individual, then you should be doubting its ability to transfer. If the equipment is limited in its ability to progressively overload over training sessions, training periods, you should be questioning its transfer. If it's not allowing you that progressive overload and doesn't address the needs of immediate or long-term unloading and deloading, then you should be questioning its ability to transfer. And so, when you have a strong background in your field, weeding through tools is really quick. I don't think there's a carpenter out there who is worth his weight who couldn't look at a new gadget and say, trust me, that one's going to work. Trust me, that one's funny, cool, but don't waste your time. And so what we're trying to do now with strength coaches is empower them with kind of new knowledge, new information, using the tool as a way to think about that. And what I always like is at the end of the conversation, if someone walks away and says, that's interesting, I never thought of it like that. Like, maybe we need to reassess how we're using some of these tools or the value we thought we were getting. Then I think we've done a good job in educating that young group. Because and I know, as some of the older guys, I just jumped in with weight training. Mm-hmm. And until I got asked this question, I was working with world number 1 in one of the biggest Olympic sports out there. And we were bench pressing. We're getting a 1RM. This is 2003, preparing for Athens 2004. He's bench pressing 80 kilos, which is about 170, 180 pounds as a test. This is a badminton athlete. One of the most popular. Badminton has now surpassed, I think football is the most popular sport on the planet. And he looked at me and he goes, Coach, my racket weighs 80 grams.
Yeah.
Why do I have to bench press 80 kilos? Mm-hmm. And it was the best question I've ever been asked by anybody in my career. And the truth is, he never has to bench press 80 kilos. In fact, for performance in his sport, he never has to do a bench press in his life. Mm. But back then, we were in the model, get them strong, had those lifts. Nowadays, it's, I realize, and we realize, it's a very different conversation. It goes back to what you said. Know the strength you need. Know the demands of your sport. And if you're not sure what those demands are, don't read it online. Go down to the training hall, and trust me, your coach will appreciate this. Sit with that coach for a week, watch his training, be quiet, and then eventually start asking him questions like, what do you see here? What do you see here? And that coach is going to start opening up and telling you what matters. And you're going to go back to your weight room program and think, wow, let me rethink this. I just think if S&Cs want to really learn, they need to be good movers, or at least try the move, and they need to be really close to the people that understand the technical movement and the parameters that are important to winning, and that's the coach. And I know many S&Cs do that very well, and I know many that don't think that's even their job. Mm. They take the athlete in, they make them strong, they give their fitness report, they send the athlete back, they're happy, did my job, athlete goes away, no win, I don't care. I did my job. Just don't be that guy or girl.
So there's so much in there that I love, but I don't want to get this piece lost. So I want to make sure that I ask this quickly. Not quickly, but I want to ask this first before we go down another rabbit hole. You've referenced, you've developed something, you've glued weight to the body to be able to add resistance. Explain to me how LILA works. Like, what is it, and can you kind of describe how it works?
Well, here's the simple thing. It's weight training. And guess what? If you've got any, if I said, if you're really strong in that periodization of loading and you understand it, then you already know how weight training works. You put it, you somehow get a muscle to contract against it over time with some level of progression, and you will get some level of performance adaptation, strength, power, explosiveness, agility, endurance. That's how LILA works. So it's not something, I keep saying this stuff isn't magnets, it's not, we're not working on beta receptors in the brain and something that somebody makes sound good, but nobody really understands, or a mega waves. This is weight training. It's just a very new, lightweight, individualized, portable form of weight training that goes on the body in a very lean fashion. So the athlete can go and do movements that matter to their sport with resistance in the places that they need it. And in the simplest form, if you think about, so I coined this term wearable resistance, micro loading, micro weights, all those things around the area. But really, these things existed to some degree with like a weighted vest, an ankle weight, a wrist weight. And I can tell you, every coach I've ever talked to said, Joe, man, I was trying to do that in the 80s. I was cutting up weight vests, or we were taping stuff on the body and we were taping it here. And I was like, yeah, that's how I started. And then I just continued it longer than anybody else, 24 years of it. So at the end of the day, I actually brought one for you.
Beautiful. Yes, perfect.
So this is 100-gram load. All right. This is what we call an education load because it's got that arrow. And there's a lot of technical stuff in what goes on putting load on the body. But ultimately, that's 4 ounces. And I can tell you, athletes like Kenny Bednark, Sha'Carri Richardson, TT Twanisha, they will tell you exactly how heavy this little load is when they start running on a track with it.
Yeah.
And I actually put a sleeve on because I thought you might ask. So this is a forearm sleeve. This is actually my forearm sleeve. So you talked about striking. I'm a boxer. Okay. And after my semi-professional rugby career, I switched into combat and boxing, and I use these forearm sleeves a lot. So what we needed to do with the weight, what makes this unique is a bunch of things. First off, if you look at that design, all right, it's super thin, super light. And you literally see that if that was resting on the ocean, it would move with the wave, just like the body. When you put that on the body, the other thing you notice is I can put that anywhere. I can put that at the wrist. I can put that at the elbow. I can put that with that arrow pointing down. I can put that with that arrow pointing up. And that gives it some level of adjustability, which means individualization. Now, here's the funny thing. Every position I just showed you on a high-level athlete, let's say we just got a big partnership with Tennis Australia, one of the world's biggest sporting organizations. You put this on an elite tennis player, you put that load in a different position, and you let that person feel the racket. They will give you a different response for every position of that load. Some of them will say, wow, that's hard. Some will say that's easy. Some will say that's assisting me. Wow, that's resisting me. Wow, that's for my internal rotation. That's my outside. Wow, my terminal velocity is great. Oh, now my power is good. When we started putting this load all over the body, the first thing we found that we didn't know is where you put weight is way more important than how much weight you're using.
Yeah.
When it comes to movement. Now, heavy strength coaches with a squat, young kid, 15 years old, wants to be a defensive end. It's always skinny as a rail. That kid's going to need to do some squats to build their muscle mass.
Right.
No problem. That tool is the best tool for that job. But once that kid starts moving and realizes his front push and his back push, his turn to the right, his opening of his left hip, yeah, they're not working. I'm telling you, that's not done in a ball and a core exercise with a band in the gym. That has to be done in equipment on the field in the context of the real positions that happen. And having that ability, one sec, I just saw my battery low.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we're good.
Sweet.
Having that ability to load that movement specifically is why we created that. And like I said, the two things we found out that I always want to share is where you put load when it comes to specificity of movement is way more important than how much load. And two, light is the new heavy.
Mm.
You know, when we started putting this on bodies, we were putting like 1, 2, 3, 5% of body weight. I remember Justin Gatton loading up with like 3 pounds on a leg. He did 170-meter run and he comes back and he just starts stripping weight off. And Dennis is laughing. He goes, "Man, Joe told me don't put on all that heavy weight." And Justin's like, you have no idea how heavy this is once you start moving. And here's the secret. Because it's designed like this, look how streamlined that is. You know, I can tell you that is a 4-millimeter thick load. I already know what a 5, a 6, or 7, or 8-millimeter load will do to the body in terms of your ability to be aware of it. We tested all of that. When you put that load on there and go to move, the first thing that happens is you're not getting a defensive response registering from the brain that, oh, I'm loaded, change how I'm moving. You know, and even a lightweight vest, even 1 pound on a leg will do that. And so we had to create a tool that stayed below the threshold of inhibition response and could go past it so the athlete could work through that range. So what Justin meant was, I just ran at full speed at 70, and at full speed for 70 meters, for a guy like me, 4 ounces is heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started putting on people, I realized, wow, we got to start thinking light, because the athletes we were using were the best athletes in the world in their sport. And when we loaded them up, they were all like, no, I don't want that. That's too heavy. Now it's just like the gym. Now I'm just slow. And I was like, okay, well, how much weight do you want? He goes like, dude, literally, I just want 2 weights right here. I can feel that. That's on my posture. I'm going to wear it for 25 minutes of my gameplay. It's exactly what I need for my speed. And I would come back from these early sessions and I was like, oh my God, like we got to rethink all of this. And I go back to Nick saying it's going to take years to figure out how to use that. And, you know, we're now in those years. And with people like Dennis Mitchell and Randy Huntington and Carl from the Golden State Warriors and Marco Yam with the Vikings, like Nick Winkelman, Nick Gill over there at the All Blacks, you know, just all the different people at the elite level that we've worked with have all added to our understanding. And of course, John Cronin and the 50 plus published papers we've done on it around the world. So we're still in a learning phase, but that's the product. It's lightweight. These loads come from as little as 2 ounces to a 4 ounce to a 8 ounce and a 12 ounce. You can put up to several kilos or pounds on the body, but when you get into real speed movement, you don't.
Yeah.
I look at some of our NFL draft guys. I mean, who do we have? TK Latham. He was 360 pounds, 6'7", and 300 grams. And he looked at me and goes, "Yeah, people are going to hate me, but that's heavy."
Yeah.
He could probably squat 800 pounds.
Yeah.
But when he was doing the drill, he was saying to me, no, he said, when the load's on me there, I can feel what I need to do. And this is the other part. Once we started putting these loads on the body, we realized you don't always have to put a load on a position to make it harder. Sometimes the load's there so the athlete feels that part of the body, a proprioceptive cue. And so they come back and they're like, oh, you know that load on my hip? Yeah, now I can feel how I have to engage my core, lift the hip at the same time. Before, coach would be yelling like high knee, but I didn't know what he meant. Mm-hmm. But now we put the load there and they're like, oh, yeah. Now I know what high knee means because I can feel it in real time. And so weight training has jumped from a tool that is prescribed to a prescriptive diagnostic and change of an education tool for coaches. And I think that makes this next generation of sports scientists and S&Cs exciting generation to be in, because they're going to be more involved in the coaching of skill and technique than they ever were. You know, they're not just getting the body ready, handing it to the coach. Now it's true integration of high performance team roles where coaches are on the field. They're working with athletes with kit like this and other tools. And they're asking the S&C like, hey, should we progress? Should we get heavier? I want to load here. What do you think? The S&C who knows periodization is giving those profiles. And now you have an entire new high performance conversation going on that we never had before. And that's looking at your audience, empowering young S&Cs to think that way, to be a movement solution, not just a muscle solution. I think it's exciting.
It is exciting. And my next question, I feel like you've alluded to it, but I want to get there is, so for like team sports, you mentioned like the All Blacks. You mentioned Nick Winkman, of course, over with Irish rugby. Are they wearing this like right in practice and right in training, or is this part of the S&C session? How are you seeing it utilized?
Yeah, we're seeing it utilized. It always comes down to this. We're seeing it utilized in the way the team needs to utilize it. And I actually, running the company, you want every team to buy a suit for every player.
Yeah.
Right? And put it on everybody for every session. But the real value of his tool is its versatility and its ability to work a problem where it's needed. And I was just explaining this to, I think it's Man City football. Of course, Man City I think they're the number one sports brand on the planet right now. Of course, they were the Premiership champions last year. And they were asking me that same question, like, where would we start? Do we put it on our guys on the field, or do the rehab guys use it? Because it seems like such a great, the return to play, getting specific, getting these guys moving and confident fast. And I said, you put it where your greatest need is. Because for me, and I've been a professional S&C with many programs, you've always got an issue. So that becomes your priority. If you've got the best player in the world right now injured, then you're not thinking about 30 guys. You're thinking about one guy, and you've got to get him back. And so some teams say, look, what I want to do is I want to get like Golden State Warriors. When they came to us, it was when, the man got injured. And so their first need was, let's get some kit together for the rehab team to get his rehab going and to work with him on that. And I said, that makes sense. And once you understand the tool there, you'll have the option to know if you want to expand it into more areas of your program, not being told you have to do that. So some teams start with kind of kit for their rehab program, just because if you've ever worked at pro or elite sport and you're an S&C, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Most of your time is guys on IR. It's managing, keeping people healthy.
Yep.
They're already there. You're not doing a lot of high performance work. You're struggling with a busy schedule, travel, and so that kind of becomes a real focus. Then you go down the trough a little bit and you look at some programs that have a really good handle of that, or college or high school programs where performance is, let's get the whole team working. They'll come in and they'll get a set of something like shorts or calves for the entire team, and they throw it right into their warm-up and their on-field conditioning sessions, just because that gives them such a greater boost in movement versatility, which is what you want with a young athlete. Tissue resilience, better movement, better connection to the body, and which is different than just what an elite might be. So the answer is use it where you want. You can put it on, Paris Saint-Germain bought 70, 80 suits when I went in there. They used it everywhere. Minnesota Vikings bought it for every player, 80 sets for football. But they used it in the rehab area. They used it on field and warm-ups, and their program allowed them to do that. Like I said, Golden State Warriors and the All Blacks bought in, I think it was like a half dozen or a dozen suits each for specific training with specific people at specific times. And so I just tell coaches, it's a tool. How does your program work? Then I'll make a suggestion on what the best way to bring it in. So it's really is up to the coach. And again, once the coach understands it's weight training. But I always tell people the simplest thing to do is think of a case study. If you've got a player right now you're doing some one-on-one focus with, and you really need to get specific, that's a good place to start. Because once you play with any tool for a little bit of period, I mean, you remember your first time learning how to swipe and navigate through a smartphone? And, within a month, you were downloading apps, taking videos, editing, you were doing all that. But I remember I bought my first iPhone was like an iPhone 6 or 7. So I didn't get in there for 6 or 7 years and cycles. So it's kind of like that, right? Tech takes time. So my suggestion is, if you're not sure where to start simple. Start with some kit. Think of your priority in your program. If right now you say, number one thing we got right now, I got a bunch of young athletes. I want their knees strong for the season. We're off season right now. Like a lot of high school and college programs are starting to look at their off season for next year, summer program coming up. And I'd say, get them training in those calves and shorts. You don't need upper body kit for 90% of sports. There's value to that for things you have, but let's get those knees and hips strong, all those injury areas, get their conditioning high, and do it at high speed. Because I probably get caned for this. There's a big, area of discussion, as you know, on hamstring health. Here's the secret. There isn't a jogger in the world who's ever hurt their hamstring. You know why? Because jogging doesn't put stress on the hamstring.
Right.
You up that speed a little bit, now you got a hamstring problem, because the hamstring, for all intent and purpose, is a high speed muscle. And so your solution for training it has to have a high speed component. And I think our kit is probably the best high speed tool to target stability and eccentric and specific reactive sort of switch between eccentric, concentric on a hamstring or a leg in the field, and real movements or on the track where you use it. And I know this because the best people in the world have come to us for that. Yeah. And 6 years ago, I wasn't this confident. I'm trying not to sound cocky, but we're confident now. Yeah. And 6 years ago, we thought it worked. Now we know it does. And so when you're looking at, if you're a young coach with a young team, more important than performance is getting their bodies healthy, getting their bodies strong, getting tissue resilience and their overall confidence in the way they move up, and keeping them healthy. Because I always tell them, I know you got to win, even if you're a high school, but you also want to think about passing them to college, maybe passing them to pro. And I think the other thing we're not doing as much as we did before, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, we're caring for the athlete's health a lot better these days.
Yeah.
And so I look at kit like ours and I'm saying, don't just load them up heavy and think, oh, wow, we're going to get them fast. They're all going to run like Kenny now. And I'm like, yeah, but if you could be healthy all season and at high level training every day, don't you think that's going to give you more value for your coaching than just saying this one guy got fast? So, yeah. And again, I'm throwing lots of examples. Hopefully the audience is thinking, well, I got a problem. I'd like to explore it for that.
Yeah.
It's a tool. Know where you need help with a tool. And where we can help is high speed training, movement and skill specific training, and injury prevention, resistance, and rebuilding from and for high speed and sport specific activities. I think that's really our wheelhouse.
The best ability is availability, right? We all understand that becomes the name of the game at the end of the day, right? So yeah, I mean, definite advice that should not be taken lightly, especially like you said, as you start to move up the ladder of high school, college, pro sport, keeping that person on the pitch first and then having them perform at the highest level is the priority. Because if they're high performers but they're not available, it doesn't help you much.
100%. What does it matter if you're not on the field? And I keep telling coaches this. I said, the number one risk is injury, not poor performance. You can have poor performance in a team sport and still win.
Yeah.
You can't be part of anything if you're not in the game, and I think when people ask me, well, what have you seen change in 4 decades? I'm telling you, one thing I see is, how we're getting more injuries because we're training harder, and there's a lot, and I still think we're not fully understanding the high speed nature of how most sports injuries really occur. But we are getting better at bringing them back, and we're certainly more aware and ethical in our approach to keeping them healthy. I mean, I was in there with Yo Murphy. Yo Murphy's got an incredible training program. Yo Murphy, out of Yo Murphy, he used to be with House of Athlete now, and Troy Jones out of Florida. And I went in there for the draft with them, and I watched those draft guys at the facility, 45 minutes of movement prep prior to training, right? And I thought 20 years ago, you know what movement prep was? That was getting out of your car, walking to the training center. And putting on your shorts. And there was that 5-minute stretch. And I was thinking, just watching all these college guys come through with their rollers and their bands and their movement awareness and just getting everything pliable and ready. And I thought, man, this is different. And kudos to everybody who's been part of moving that forward.
Talk to me about the education that you guys provide. you had mentioned that there was like a course or education. What
Yeah.
is that comprised of?
So as I'd mentioned, we've got 8 modules. It's our WT level 1. We've already started our level 2, which is sport specific technical areas. Level 2 is the big area, speed and sprint mechanics. And it starts off mainly with linear. And this is everything we've learned and are continuing to learn with people like our speed partners, like Star Athletics, with Dennis Mitchell, Randy Huntington. I just chatted with Randy this morning because he said, he asked me if I saw Christian McCaffrey's our latest. So I was just in LA with Christian McCaffrey's team, and they called me in immediately when they started his rebuild because he's had a few issues. I think everybody in San Francisco knows.
Yeah,
But
Achilles.
that guy is a beast. So I flew in there with them, got them sorted out, and they're sending me these updates. And like when you're working with guys like Randy and Dennis, you're learning stuff every day. And in that learning, we put that into the course to help coaches understand first using this as a weight training tool. That's kind of the basic step.
Mhm.
And that is, how do I put load into sport to kind of get my baseline of my athletes from here to here? Kind of availability, what you said. Because if you can do anything for a program, we always talk about that. All coaches want a strong minimum. And a strong minimum is basically the concept that on any given day, regardless if we're peaked or ready or not, we can perform in our sport at a high level.
Mhm.
Because that relates to consistency, and consistency is the name of the game in sport. Winning once is great, but champions win consistently over time because they're available, because their baseline isn't here, it's here.
Mhm.
And when you've got a baseline that's here, as you know, you get a lot less troughs and highs. You hum along like this. And so you're in the conversation of winning at a higher degree. And so I always say, build exogen into your warm up, build up that tissue resilience. And our course starts out teaching you about that. Then it talks about the limitations of current strength training and where different tools fit in. What do you use heavyweight training for? What do you not use it for? What do you use bands and cables and tubing for? What do you use resistive devices that may have a high-speed component? And where would you use wearable? So this course is not your typical, here's our product, here's how to use our product, good luck. It's a product course. I've always been an educator in the field. And so my thought on this course was, we're upskilling and rethinking the way we think about training, because if you understand some of that foundation stuff, you become a better service provider, even if you don't have our product. And I used to think, if someone took this course and they didn't have our product, would it help them? And I wanted them to feel like this thing gave me value in a lot of areas, not just saying I can use the tool, because I can show you how to use this. If you're a high level person, I can show you that pretty quick. And so it's really about knowing your tools, and then also taking those tools, looking at that force velocity curve and thinking about different times of the year and answering that question you asked, like, hey, Joe, where would I start? I've got these players with this problem. I'm in season right now, but we're going to be off season soon. And I've got these guys that are injured. Like, that's a lot for a performance person to take in. And so it's about wading through those questions. One, historically where our field came from and the understanding of those tools and how our product fits in. Because the other thing too is our product doesn't do everything also, right? It's got its limitations. And you want to be, you have to people to understand that. And know your tools, know them better. Now you have context for what this does. Here how it is, and then we start to touch on the most exciting area. This is your movement problem solution. I'm going to make a very bold, possibly a little bit arrogant, certainly I hope confident comment. And this is what I want every strength coach in the world to be able to say. There isn't a movement solution on the planet right now that I personally cannot solve. And that's a big call.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I make that statement is because the best people in the world come to me for that expertise. And I don't want to name drop here, but the best NFL players came to me and said, Joe, we need your kit, and can you come in and help because we've got this issue? Joe, we've got the best NBA player arguably on the planet, and we need some help on this issue. We've got the best running back. We've got the best rugby players. Because one thing we learned with this is we can really get specific on movement problems. So somebody's knee is enclosing at high speed on the left side on their first 1, 2, 3 steps out of the block, we can fix that. You got a badminton player whose front arm is not in balance with their back arm in a smash. We can fix that. I just got back from Tennis Australia, and the coaches sit there and they were talking through movement problems they're working with some of the top tennis players in the world, and I was like, we can solve all of those.
Mm.
And it's because we have a tool, and we spent so long with that tool and knowing how to load, because Exogen is both a load to create change, but it's a coaching cue that helps the athlete feel the right technical pattern they need in real time. And if I have a goal, it's to empower coaches to turn around and say, when someone comes in and says, yeah, now I can see his left leg's just not lifting. I've tried everything, cued him on this. We did the band work, we did that. But as soon as he gets to high speed, that's not happening. And that's the coach to say, I know what to do. Let's get some load on that left side leg. Let's start proximal to the hip. Let's load them above and below the hip so they feel it. Let's start them feeling that. And that athlete, after one session, will say, oh, yeah. Now I know what I'm supposed to feel.
Yeah.
And so people are coming to us with those problems. And here's the exciting part. With all the data that we have now, we're able to start tracking those problems in real time. And so it's not just being able to say, hey, you feel better now? Yeah, I feel great. The problem's gone away. It would be nice if we knew what the numbers were.
Yeah.
So the next phase for us is actually, we've got our AI coaching system that's building the entire sensor system into the Exogen solution so that you get real-time feedback on what's happening while you're loaded.
For clarity, if there is a difference between Exogen and LILA, explain to me what that is. Yeah.
LILA's the brand. LILA's our Nike. Exogen is our Air Jordans.
There you go.
Is exoskeleton generation 1. That's the actual Exogen suit. Okay. And that's because we have several new tech coming out under the LILA brand. But when people say I use the LILAs, I love them, I'm like, I don't mind. That's great. I know it takes time to get people familiar with that, because at the start, your brand and your products are kind of the same.
Or the same thing,
but
right?
Sorry. Yeah. And good marketing guys like Joe sort out that confusion, man.
Yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, it's true. But I love the analogy. LILA is Nike and Exogen is the Jordan. So you've got your brand and then the product. So that makes sense. So the LILA brand will be coming out with many more products, Exogen and then something else. To that end, and going back to like this Daniel Priestley thing, next 3 to 6 years, where do you see LILA going? Like, what is your vision, man?
Yeah, look, if you're not talking about AI and integration of data and tech, you're kind of an outdated conversation. So we've already patented our first version of the product. I don't want to say too much here, obviously, sure. But we kind of share information pretty openly, even with our competitors, because we're from a sports science background, and sharing usually builds the community. And that is what everybody wants to know right now when they train with something like Exogen, because it's affecting speed, is, okay, how much faster am I getting?
Yeah.
And most people that are using tech will understand that currently all the metrics we're dealing with in sport, they're all linear. Mm-hmm. It's linear metrics of speed. This is change over a space, a time. But the body doesn't produce movement through linear movements. It produces movement through rotational movement.
Okay.
And so what matters more in terms of biomechanically what's happening on the body is rotational velocity, rotational acceleration, and here's the word for the future, rotational workload. Because rotational workload stress is what's going to tell you what's going on with the joint and when that joint needs to be unloaded. And the baseball guys will get this for everything and when throwing. How much rotational stress can a joint handle before it's at risk of an injury? Now, because we have this suit, and it's really the only kit at the moment that can directly change and train rotational movements of body segments at a high level in every environment, we also have the ability to measure that in the same application. Give it to you real time on the app, and then know how to progress or unprogress or deload based on the data you're getting. So, I keep saying all movement is rotational. The future is light. And where you put load is more important than how much load when it comes to specificity. And this is what the future and the next stages for us look like.
There's a progression that coaches will go through. probably a very general statement, but at least in the time that I've seen it, where they start where I think we've all started, weight room,
Yeah.
heavyweight, and whoever the influence is. You had mentioned Bill Pearl. For me, it might have been Schwarzenegger and Louis Simmons, but like it of course, like the roots of strength and conditioning are definitely from the Eastern Bloc to the United States in the dungeon, and then at some point in time they realize that speed matters, and how they implement it I think is different. So if we talk about like West Side Barbell or anything, they get this idea that holy cow, it's not just about heavier. For you personally, where did that realization start to happen for you, where you're like, man, you know what, we're probably not getting this, not necessarily right, but there's something missing here? Like, where did that happen for you?
I can tell you every aha moment in that journey. And I remember the aha moment on this one. It goes back to that whole idea about heavy versus light. And now I'm going to talk about what most people wouldn't even consider heavy. Again, being in Malaysia, we have exposure to many high level athletes. One of the big sports is badminton here. And so after my time in the NBA, I thought back then NBA players were kind of the quickest cats I'd ever worked with until I met singles badminton players. And I realized, yeah, these guys are like that quickness they have. They're like, it's just another level. And that's because, that shuttlecock's moving at 500 to 600 kilometers per hour, 300 to 50 miles an hour coming off the court, off the racket. And what that tells you is, and although it's designed to decelerate, what it tells you is the speed of reaction is at the highest movement speeds possible. So that's context. Now we got world number one. This guy was one of the best badminton players of all time, Dato Lee Chong Wei, a friend of mine. One of Malaysia's best ever athletes, multiple Olympic medalist, world champion, etc. We're on court with him, and we're using a 5-pound weight vest. So we're already out of the conversation of squats and power cleans. Yeah. Now a lot of people think, oh yeah, like a weight vest that's for me a velocity tool. Okay. Well, let's take that to the micro level of what these conversations for me started to become. They always had these 5-pound weight vests, and they were like the 5-pound Adidas weight vest. The athletes trained with them. They would put them on, and they do these things called high-speed shuttle drills. You got 1, 2, or 3, 4 coaches on the other side of the court. Each one of them has a rack of shuttlecocks, and they're just firing them at the singles player on the other side for a minute to a minute and a half nonstop. And they'll do anywhere from 10 to 25 of these sets in a row. So you just imagine that guy. And he's not trying to just hit them back. He's hitting them with technique.
Yeah.
Right? Backcourt smash, front court palm, backcourt smash, bum, bum, bum. And so it's a high-speed drill. So what they like to do to load that is put on a 5-pound weight vest. So they came in, they bought a bunch of our suits. They put our Exogen top on. Here he is, world number one. They put it on him. And the coach looks at me and says, okay, load up 5 pounds. And I said, Coach, you don't need 5 pounds anymore now because we could adjust it. Why don't we start light and we'll progress it? Because I was starting to learn, hey, we don't have to use 5 pounds. 5-pound weight vest is $100. You paid $300 for mine. Don't worry. But Coach looked at me and goes, no, Joe, I want 5 pounds. The other one was 5 pounds. This one needs to be 5 pounds. And I was like, all right. And one thing you learn in S&C, don't argue with coaches. You win them over.
Right.
So I said, no problem. I looked at Lee Chong Wei. He already knew. I could see the look in his eyes. And so we put 5 pounds on him. He did one set, and he was so mad. He just came over, and he started stripping off the weight. Now, when you're world number one in an elite sports program, most places in the world, you kind of get your own say. And anybody working in high performance knows that. Because whoever you are within your program, you've got some say. So when he says no, people listen. So he comes over. He strips off all this weight. And we're both standing there like, whoa, for the next set. And he looked at us and he said straight out, he goes, no. He said, this is not the gym. This is badminton. And he said, I don't want to be slow. He walks back out on court and he got ready for the next set. Now from 5 kilos, 5 kilos, which is 10.11 pounds. Yeah.
Right.
So from 5 kilos, ask yourself what weight he self-selected as a training load as the number one badminton player on the planet to push himself in those drills.
1 kilo?
500 grams.
500 grams, half a kilo.
He went, that was self-selected. And then he finished the set and he came back and he looked at me and goes,
That's it.
Now this is badminton. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, like we're not seeing this anymore. We're thinking heavy, but what he was looking at is I have 15 of these to do. And what's important is I need to availability. I need to be as available to put in effort on the 15th rep as the first rep. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm not, that's not going to transfer to the way I play a game. Because 2.5 hours into a world championship or Olympic gold medal final, I'm not going to feel like that.
Yeah.
I need something that's going to get me to where, give me the stimulus that I need to feel that. And it was a light load. And he put it on a very specific part of his front body, which pulled him forward, which forced him into a posture position that he had to work at so that he didn't slouch and create all those things that happen when a body breaks down. So not only were we putting in the impetus for adaptation for the conditioning and speed, but also keeping the technical skill in his body position correct. Because when that breaks down, all his movement becomes a bigger problem. And if anybody understands specific endurance and the breakdown of specific endurance, you know it's technical before it's physiological.
Mm.
And that is, as soon as your certain parts of your body get tired, your technique breaks
Technique.
down.
Mm-hmm.
When your technique breaks down, you lose efficiency and you lose availability. Availability of the ability to produce force in the right places. And your opponent in a world championship final knows exactly where you're weak.
Mm-hmm.
And they will figure that out by 1 inch, 1 centimeter, and they will look for that.
Yep.
And so, yeah, that was that aha moment where I realized, wow, even within what we considered light, we have to think about light on a whole new level when it comes to not just speed, but speed endurance.
I'd like to know a little bit more about you. And you mentioned being 19 and a wrestler and going to school.
Oh, I thought you meant now.
What did you study in college? I mean, was you said PE, but was that your
Yep.
degree? What was the path, and then what happened after that?
19 years old, wanted to play American football. I was pretty good. I was
Hey,
fast for sure. And so I was a running back and I had all those dreams. And in crappy turn of events, I tore my ACL at 18, 19 years old. And this was 1982, 80.
oh, so that's a career ender.
80,
That's a death
84.
wish.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
all right. So that happens, 83, 84. And I'm told, I go to see the doctor and he just looks at me and he says, yeah, well, you're not playing contact sport anymore. It's over. You got to remember, they didn't repair ACLs. There was nothing to repair them with.
Yeah.
They weren't even experimenting. They were starting to experiment with a Gore-Tex pouch that I think 2 years later caused so much damage and made your knee so unstable. Now, I remember reading on an article in Sports Med about Gore-Tex, and I thought, no, I'm not the guinea pig for that. So the first thing was, there I was, my whole dream gone. Nobody around you talks to you. There's no sports science. There's no internet. There's not even a book. And I just started first year of honors bachelor of physical education. So I went into a PE program, and everybody in PE, the course was designed to send people to teachers college
Mm-hmm.
to become PE teachers. When I graduated, out of 90 people, 88 went to teachers college. Me and one other guy went on to do our masters. And I was, by then, I was just, when I got hurt, and I remember saying, like, literally overnight, I said, well, screw this. I didn't wait around. I said, if I can't play the sport, then I'm going to train the sport and I'm going to coach.
Love it.
And I literally was like that. I just decided that overnight. And so I realized I'm going to start with my own knee. And I started learning about hamstrings and ACLs at 19. And I put together my own rehab program, and I went on to play very high level sport. And eventually I got that ACL done so I could play high level rugby. But that launched me towards the field of training. But I'd already loved, I was very good in art, science, and sport, physical education. So I kind of think I was always going to marry those. So then I went and studied physical education, and I was fascinated with everything science and strength and conditioning. By the second year in my physical education course, my professor asked me to teach the entire module on strength and conditioning because I spent every day in the gym. And I was surrounded by these old school Olympic lifters, bodybuilders, and power lifters. And if you were in the gym in the 80s, those were the only guys you met.
Yeah.
And so these things were shaping me, and those old guys, as you know, like us old guys, when a young guy comes through an S&C or whatever, and they're really interested and they're willing to put in time and listen and try, you love to bring them in and teach them because someone also did that for you.
Yep.
And so I so appreciate those guys. They saw me and they're like, all right, Joe, you, on Wednesday coming in, I'm going to take you through hundreds. And I was like, what's hundreds? He goes, you'll find out on Wednesday. And now that's, I find out 100 is 220 pounds for 3 sets of 100 reps, you know, and I remember it and I was like, why do we even do that? And he said, you tell me when you're done.
Yeah.
And so, and they were doing, and of course they were just crazy, the stuff we did back then. And so, you know, this was shaping my mind on sport and training, and interspersed with that, at that time, there was starting to be more sports science type courses. There was physiology, biomechanics. There was no high level S&C stuff. Like I said, I was the guy teaching it. And I started volunteering, and this is important. My first paid job in strength and conditioning was in the NBA, and I manufactured that role. But I spent 12 years volunteering, and I was volunteering with Team Canada teams going to the Olympics.
Yeah.
You know, because if no one was giving you a job, and there was no jobs, there was no S&C jobs back in the 80s and 90s in Canada.
Yeah.
There was a few pro teams starting to hire people. So if you're a young S&C coach, just walk. If you're not volunteering, I don't believe you want to be there. Bullshit. Get out there, walk into a team, say, I'd love to help. Can I learn? And that opens your doors. And so I was studying PE. At the end of PE, I realized I didn't learn most of my learning. I learned in the gym, muscle fitness, and that was early days of the NSCA. I think their first journal was popping up like 86, 87. By 89, I ran off and wrote my exam. I think, you know, I got the highest result in North America. I was just so, like, I was passionate about this. But even the journal articles, I think they were really good at that time. I think they gave context, especially there was no information. So most of my learning, like anybody who's really passionate, was done on my own. And I went out there everywhere, training with guys who knew how to train, finding coaches, finding programs, calling people. But from the formal side, that bachelor's of education, physical education, give me a good foundation into science and anatomy. And you really did need that, and biomechanics. And then 1992, I find myself with Mike Stone. I'm going to go down there and study with him in Appalachian State. And this is guru time, back when it was just starting to go, you know, now S&C people were talking about. I got accepted there, but I had to wait 4 months because of something going on between the US and Canada. I couldn't register late. I'd have to wait, but I got in out at UBC in Vancouver immediately. And I was impatient. So I said, sorry, Mike, I'm going to UBC. I'm going to study in Vancouver. And I just wanted to get into my master's. And it worked out, as these things always do. My mentor told me something once, and he said, Joe, it's important to learn when you come to a fork in the road, just take it.
Take it.
If you're young and you're listening to what that means, it was the best piece of advice I've ever been given, because the mistake in life is looking at multiple directions and humming and hawing what to do. Just go, you'll figure it out. And if it's not working, you'll figure that out too. And so when I had that fork and I thought, I'm not waiting for 4 months. Mike Stone is the biggest name here right now, but I got an opportunity right now. I'm going. I'm not sitting around here for 4 months. And it turned out to be, I think, the right decision. Yeah. And we'll never know, but you just go, you know, like I got injured. All right, I'm not waiting around on injuries. I'm not looking for another sport. If I can't play it, I'm training it. And so then I did my master's. And by then, now we're talking about the 90s. And that's when you saw, as you would have seen, sport. Now we're talking about human kinetics. Now it was high level sports science. But what was really interesting, I got out to Vancouver. You got the Canucks there. You got the Whitecaps there. The Grizzlies are coming to town. Because of all that free work I'd done and studying on my own, I came to Vancouver and I didn't realize how high my expertise was. Next thing you knew, I had like the School of Medicine, the School of Physiotherapy, you know, elite coaches, the Canucks training team calling me and asked me can you come down and help test? And I had built that platform because of all that extra work. So as much as you follow a sports science route, and I think the sports science programs now are really good at giving you practical information that helps you develop that at the same time. But still, I think you have to throw yourself out there. You really got to jump in. If you're really passionate about anything, you do it that way anyway. And then I did my master's. And if you look at the field now, I never did my PhD. I'm going to do it. It's going to be in LILA, and it's going to be in the area of flow. One thing that I've learned with flow, and I spent a lot of time studying this, I think it's a massive area for the future. I think we haven't really been able to understand it in a lot of ways because the tools we were using to try and get to it were still limited. But I think right now we're at a higher level of understanding of what flow state can and will be. I've been doing a lot of work in that area. I think it's my real forte, but that's going to be the next step, is doing my PhD. And now I'm doing it kind of for me, just to continue that. But as you've seen in the field, when I started out, strength coaches didn't even have a degree.
Yeah.
Then they started getting like a college diploma or a university degree. Then you needed a master's. Now every S&C I meet just finished their PhD, and I'm like, wow, there are some really sharp young people in this field, and I think it's awesome.
It is awesome to see how it's developed. You mentioned that you were very good at the arts as well, and I can see it. What interests outside of S&C influence the way you see S&C, if any?
Everything, 100%. I'm in this field. Like LILA, I tell people, as a CEO, you have two hats now. I'm this coach educator, but I'm also this business person. And people talk about things in the business world like exit strategy and all that. And I'm like, what do you mean exit strategy? I've been in sport my entire life.
Yeah.
Like LILA's not, I'm not going to do this and then open restaurants. This is what we're doing. This is our passion. Like the next step for me is more of what we're doing. And the one thing I've always been interested in is what is the future? And you know what? You asked about interest. The past and the physical world are the biggest influences on how I understand the world. And I'm an outdoors guy, a jungle guy. I fish, I hunt. I'm in the forest nonstop. People know me. They literally call me Tarzan here. I've done jungle guiding in the forests, and I'm in the forest a lot. And one of the reasons I go there is nature gives you most of the answers you need. And when you understand nature and you learn about science and then you see it in real time happening in front of you, the architecture of nature, I'll give you an example. Because I have such a strong sense of that, I think, and I'm always connected to that almost on a daily and weekly level. When I was developing the product and our design team was getting lost, and we wrote a bunch of design rules on the board, and this product was in development for 13 years. Like we didn't get the first, I was told to get the first iteration out, who's first is fast and blah, blah, blah. I was like, I'm not doing this to be fast. I'm going to make this thing perfect because it has to meet my requirements. And my requirement is this: when the best athlete in the world puts it on, they're going to look at me and say, wow, this is comfortable. 2, I don't even feel that weight. 3, wow, this is working and I feel it. And I knew the mindset and the feel of sensitivity an athlete would have to make those comments. And it wouldn't happen if we skimped in anything we did. I was there with McCaffrey. So talking about the art, I was sitting there with him in his house in LA and the team, and put the suit on. And he was asking me all these questions. I was blown away his level of sports science understanding. And that, like I said, what athletes know today, he's talking about fascia and tissue resilience and this and that, his recovery techniques. And I was like, wow, these guys aren't just being told what to do anymore. So he was on that. He was asking me everything about the product, blah, 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 this. And I was showing him our fascial lines and I was showing them load. And I was saying, there's nothing on this product that was there for show except that green color. Yeah. The only design feature is green. And I said, everything else was built on human anatomy. And you can't understand human anatomy if you don't understand biology. And biology and human anatomy have an art to them. And the loading of body and movement is an artistic endeavor as much as it's a biomechanical and a physiological one. And so I think all those things really gave me an appreciation for that. So when we had design problems, I remember when we were designing these loads and when we were designing the kit, and if you look at the kit, the actual sewing seams and the patterns on the product are myofascial patterns. It's the only product in the world that's built on your myofascial system. And that came about accidentally. We were in the design room with our designers. There's about 6 of us in there, friends and people that were working on it. And we were trying to figure out where to put lines so we could color the lines. And it was all about trying to make the product look cool. We were trying to think like Nike. And, well, if you put a line here, it'll look slimming. And if you put a V like this, like a Gymshark or whatever it is, it's going to look cool. And I was like, we're not thinking right. We should be thinking about the body. The body should be driving everything we do right now. And I said, scrap this, everybody go home. And I kicked them all out. And I remember I was very frustrated. I was like, how do we solve this? And I was looking at the board, and it was a mess, because you've got technical fashion designers, pattern cutters, costume designers, sports science people all looking at it. And everybody was just giving me their opinion. And I was like, well, we get one wrong opinion, this product's going to have problems. And I remember just staring at the board, and I thought, it's right in front of me. This answer to design for the construction lines has to be like everything else. It has to have an organic solution. So I said, I literally grabbed my textbook and my anatomy book, and I started skipping through it. And I was skipping through it, and I was just looking, what are these lines? What part of the body is this? And then I saw the fascial system, and I saw the crisscross, loci. Your body has two fascial loci that allow rotations, right? One is around the umbilicus, one is around the upper transverse spine. And that's where all rotational movement really comes from in a sagittal plane. And I looked at the fascial system, and I was like, fascia. The exogen undergarment has to be like fascial system, which means these lines have to support fascial movement. And if we have a line that is across a fascial movement line, then we made a mistake. A high-level athlete is going to feel that. A high-level athlete is going to say, that feels weird. Yeah. Because we were so compressive. And so I just said, I was so excited. I couldn't sleep. I drew it all out. I put together a whole slideshow. Next day, called the team, and I said, you guys, here's the motivation. Now figure that shit out. Now, and I told the pattern cutters, and they're like, it's not going to work. These patterns are going to be too hard for manufacturer. We're going to waste materials, all this stuff. Because manufacturing and product idea are two very different things. And I said, it doesn't matter. Even if it makes the product more expensive, we have to do that. Because the rule is the athlete can't lose focus. And if we cut corners, it's going to change that. And I don't think most people knew how much thought went in. And I think anybody who spends their time passionately in an endeavor on a tech or a product or a food, and they do it from that place of, what's driven them their whole life, you're going to end up with something that someone's put a hell of a lot of thought into. Whether it works or not or sells, that's a whole different ballgame. But that, for me, as I was going through this process, I once looked back and I realized I've kind of married art and science and sports. And I think that's why, even with all the struggles of a small company, that I'm still here and having conversations with people that say, yeah, man, like, this is cool.
Yeah.
And if anybody started their own business, or for strength coaches are running their own PTs and that, you know how hard it is at any level trying to make a living out of something you're passionate about.
So I've got one canned question, Joe, that I ask everybody, right? Like, the conversation goes where it goes, and this one is definitely gone where it's organically gone, which has been
Sorry
awesome.
if I got excited there.
No, that's what I want, man. I didn't tee you up, so if it takes you a little bit to answer, that's cool. 3 resources. Doesn't have to be a book. It can be a book if you want. Podcast, and it's also not necessarily something that I want you to tell people in order to teach them. It can be, but if I just asked you, hey man, I'm trying to upgrade in any kind of way, what 3 resources would you recommend?
Yeah, as far as books, 3, Methodology of Training by Tudor Bompa. I imagine you've read it, and I would go back and read it 1,000 times. And if you get the original Russian translations, even better. But remember, the foundation for everything I've been able to do was I'm saying this again confidently. Most of the time when I walked in the room, I realized most people didn't have the same grasp on periodization that I did. There was better people in the room. Might have been better people who understood the skating mechanics for an NHL hockey player because they worked with a pro team. But I could always understand big picture stuff better than a lot because I I spent years trying to understand the big picture concept of periodization. And the second part of that is the second resource I would tell people to go to once you get that is you need an incredibly high level understanding of hormones and how they work in the body.
Yeah.
There's a lot of resources on that. And this is why. Because every single thing you do in training, and this is talking to an S&C staff, not someone who just wants to make money or that. This is kind of our field.
Mm-hmm.
So periodization and the foundations of that, knowing what laws apply under all circumstances, principles and laws being different and all that. 2 is hormones. There's a lot of great resources on hormones. I don't have to give you a specific book, but understanding hormonal response to training is critical. That's because at the end result, the most powerful stimulus any training has on the body is what it tells the hormone to do.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can talk about micromechanics, but that's hormonal control. Physiology, hormonal control. And so what happens is when it's sort of like periodization is the big picture understanding of adaptation to training over time based on different principles and tools you use. Hormone understanding is what's happening at the most micro level across systems, but most importantly, how those systems actually integrate. And the third book I would probably recommend is a combination of The Little Prince and Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Those 2 books, I know they're kids' books,
Mm-hmm.
but if you've read them as an adult and you don't take away the bigger lesson, then I think you're missing something. Go back and read them again. And I just and talk about things that I felt shift me in ways that were really impactful as an adult. Yeah. So those are the resources I would suggest. Periodization, and certainly Bump has done some of the best work. I still think because it was originally, there's new versions that have come out that have, I think you got to look at the foundational stuff more than a new adaptation of ideas within the foundation.
Mm.
And so that's why I'm specifically mentioning his. And there are other good periodization books out there to help people with sort of new sports models and how they might model their year better. But I'm not talking about modeling your year. I'm talking about why you want to model your year.
Mm.
And being able to have, like, I just feel like I have such a level of confidence because I don't know it all, but that foundation is really strong. 2, understanding hormones will give you such a good level of knowing what's going to have impact short, medium, and long term, be it, a recovery tool, a nutritional tool, or a nutritional intervention, or a resistance program. And then 3, something that just kind of feeds your soul and gets you pointed in the right direction. I go back and read those books constantly.
Dude, I love it. So awesome. Joe, that's about 90 minutes in the can, man.
That's a lot.
Thank
You're
you.
a good listener, my friend.
Brother, it's easy to listen when the information and the talk is fantastic, dude. I appreciate your time.
That's my Italian.
You'll talk. Yeah.
Hey, come on.
Real quick now, before we absolutely sign off, best places to find information on LILA, best places to find information on Exogen. Where would you want to point people to learn more about?
LILA team. Oh, there it is.
There it is.
LILAteam.com.
Beautiful.
That's the website's there. We just added our WhatsApp ask question feature, so you can either go into the marketing info, connect directly, or just WhatsApp. And if it's like, hey, this is for Coach Joe, reach me directly in the WhatsApp feature on the line, or just look me up on Instagram, Joseph Dolcetti, my name. You find it there. Don't be scared to reach out. If there is somebody with just questions, we talk training. It's not about the product. I love talking to coaches. So my information is always free, and I'm happy to share it for anybody that thinks it has value.
Awesome, man. Joe, thank you so much for your time. I look forward to chatting with you again, my friend.
Yeah, same. And anything I can do for you, you let me know, and keep up the great work and doing the good things you do. I loved it.
Appreciate you.